going
That's
live
perfect.
now. Sorry about that, guys.
Okay.
I think I waited too long and the system timed out.
Okay.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We are live with Coping with COVID, and we have a wonderful team of panelists tonight that will be available to answer questions. Tonight, joining us, we have Dean McKay, who is a PhD. He's a professor of psychology at Fordham University, where he's a core faculty member of the Clinical Psychology Doctoral Training Program. He's an internationally recognized expert on the nature and treatment of anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorders and the role of disgust in psychopathology. So welcome, Dean. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Do you want to say a quick hello?
Yes. My pleasure to be here. Thank you. I had myself on mute. My dogs are pretty active in the background, but thank you. It's great to be here.
Generally, our viewers are very fond of pets and animals, so if we get little visitors, that's just fine.
I'll stay off mute then. Maybe they'll come visit.
Fantastic. We have Dr. Sadia Chowdhury today. She's a licensed clinical psychologist who works in private practice, specializing in the treatment of depression, anxiety, and emotion dysregulation in children and adults. She uses mindfulness and cognitive behavioral therapy in her treatment. So I think we'll have a lot of questions around that. So Sadia, thank you so much for joining us. You want to say hello to everyone?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Melanie, for having me.
Oh, thank you all for being here. I'm so thrilled. We're planning a lot of these town halls, but I'm particularly excited about this one. I think it's going to help a lot of folks. And I'm so really thrilled that you could all be here. We also have Sharon Golden, who is a psychotherapist, and she's been in private practice for 38 years. You wouldn't know it by looking at her, but 38 years. She works with adults and couples and works with healing trauma and has created blocks to gaining wholeness, which allows one to live more fully for themselves. Sharon, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, ma'am.
Absolutely. We also have Dr. Hildur Paulsdator. You may remember Hildur from our Wednesday wellness session. She was kind enough to do a meditation for us all. If you missed it, if you check out on our site, scroll down, it's still recorded and you can watch it and have a quick meditation. I felt so much better all day after that. So Hildur, thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for meditating with us on Wednesday. I'll just read a quick bio for Hildur. She is a certified mindfulness meditation instructor, ordained interfaith minister, and a Reiki master teacher. She offers private and group mindfulness meditation training, Reiki healing, and spiritual counseling. So I think we have such an amazing panel here today, and I'm so thrilled that you can be here for us today. So we do have a bunch of questions. But before I get to the questions, I just want to address, we're still in the thick of self-isolation and sheltering at home because of the COVID-19 pandemic. I think many of us probably had all kinds of feelings come up, which are totally natural in this type of a situation when you have an abrupt life change. So tonight we're hoping that this panel will be here to, answer any questions or potentially provide some resources that we can utilize, as we continue to move through this pandemic together. The one thing I'd like to stress is that while we are alone, there is such a wonderful community here, our friends and our neighbors. I've just heard just amazing stories of people helping each other out. And that's what we hope to do tonight with this virtual panel. So thank you again. I guess what I'll do is I'll probably ask a call on one of you and ask a question. And I'm sure you will do a stellar job of answering it. But if there are any other panelists that have anything they'd like to add, please feel free to, certainly add that in. I'm trying to just check really quickly. I think the way this was set up, it's on a different view than do me a favor, Dean, will you just say hello?
Hi.
I'm just trying to see if on the Facebook Live it is showing, it looks like it's just showing me, and I want it to show all of you. Hold on. These technical difficulties in the times of COVID. Oh, okay, it does. It shows you individually when you talk. Okay, that's fine. So Dean, since you are you were first, I'm going to give you our first question. Okay. What is your personal routine to take care of your mental health during quarantine? And for folks who may not always have the same routine, are routines helpful?
Sure. So I guess if I'll start with the more general part, establishing some kind of routine is going to be really critical to just feel somewhat more secure in what your life is going to look like now during this time. Is a feeling of uncertainty more generally. And so any kind of certainty that you can introduce for yourself is going to be helpful. So even if it's some modest level of structure, that's going to make a big difference for you. So you don't have to have a heavily regimented routine, but if you plan on, let's say, 2 or 3 specific things each day, and if you find that you have a lot of free time on your hands, make sure that 1 or 2 of those things are at least something relatively pleasant, or perhaps something that you were planning to do that you hadn't gotten to before. So my personal routine, frankly, has not really changed that much. I try to work out each morning. I have certain routines around work. And so fortunately, I am still able to work. And I know that that's not true for a lot of other people. And so if you're finding that you're out of work, establishing some kind of routine for yourself will really help get you through all of this. And also part of that, even the routine of having regularly scheduled meals. It's very tempting to fall out of that routine and say, oh, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to sleep till 10:30 or 11 and I'll have breakfast at noon. Maybe I'll have, lunch at around 6:30 and we'll see what happens for dinner. That's actually probably not a great strategy for your mood and your sense of well-being.
That's really helpful. Does anyone else want to add anything
Sure, please,
around the topic of routine? And it's okay if you don't. If sometimes our different disciplines, our specialties, we may have a different take.
The one thing that I've been conscious of is people thinking that now they have all this time on their hands, they're supposed to do these projects, supposed to get these things done, supposed to clean out this, supposed to, they set up all these things for themselves and then they don't. And then there's disappointment in themselves and there's, they get down on themselves for that. Mm-hmm. And I just want to point out that how important it is to recognize we are in unprecedented times, and people are living through this the best ways they can, mm-hmm. and not to put that pressure on themselves. Mm-hmm. Have to do, mm-hmm. I mm-hmm. agree with Dean, having some structure is great, and I absolutely agree with what Dean said, is having, some routine. I love the days I'm working. I know what day it is.
Mm-hmm. Same day. It's same day. It's always same day.
Same day.
With that day, therefore I know what day of the week it is. Talk to me about the days that I'm not working and I don't know so much.
Right.
And I would like to add to this, as the mother of 2 elementary school age children who are now forced to homeschool. We're not choosing to homeschool. So there was quite an adjustment there for all of us. And there are many families dealing with that now. So we have a mantra in my house that we're doing the best we can, because they're in 4th and 5th grade and maybe not able to meet all the requirements and understand how to suddenly learn in this remote capacity with so all of us, including me, the homeschooling teacher mom now, that's also the chef and works from home, being gentle with oneself. I'd like to second that. Just really not placing more pressure than is needed as we adjust.
That's really, really good advice. Sadia, did you want to add anything, or do you think it was covered?
Sure. I think one thing that we need to keep in mind at this point, we're not running a sprint, it's a marathon. And I think in the beginning there was, as Sharon was saying, excitement about, I can get this done and that done. And then, when homeschooling comes in and this comes in, everyone starts to feel overwhelmed, and that's okay. And it's really important to find this balance between having some structure and routine and calibrating day by day, and being nice to yourself and saying like, okay, if I don't get to this, I can do it tomorrow, and that's just fine. And I think it's a really good, important example for parents to set for their kids along that way too. because they're seeing us as the role models in the midst of all of this.
Right. I love all of this advice. I have to say, as the mom of 3 young children, you're all making me feel so much better because, you know, they're certainly doing their work, but my kids feel like this is a vacation. I've never seen them closer. You know, they're each other's best friends at the moment. So I definitely see the family unit growing closer. But, you know, I certainly, as someone who's running for Congress, do not have excessive amounts of time to practice writing or, you know, doing all the little math assignments, etc. And I mean, they're getting them done, but I definitely feel like it's, you know, it's, I don't feel like I'm up to par where I should be. So it's nice that reminder to be gentle and kind of just accept that it's okay if, you know, my self-imposed expectations aren't met. One thing that I would like to just remind anyone who's tuning in to this panel tonight, if you have any questions, please go ahead and write them in the comments section on Facebook, and I can ask them to the panel as well. I do have, you know, a ton of questions here, but certainly we want, you know, the people who are tuning in to get their answers, you know, that they came for. So, okay. So next question, I think I'm going to go to Sadia for this question.
Okay.
What would you say to community members who are feeling scared during this time? Or what advice would you give them?
That it is very natural to feel scared. We are in unprecedented times, and there is a lot out there to be scared of, and that's understandable. That being said, I think, you know, it's really important for us to moderate what we are tuning into and when we decide to tune out at times. You know, if we're watching the news all day and, you know, browsing on social media all day, I think naturally our anxiety is going to go up and up and up. And, you know, we have to find a balance. So stay informed, know what it is that, you know, is being recommended for us to do. And at the same time, take some time out to tune out and focus on some hobbies or things, and connect with loved ones and do what you can do to help with that.
Okay, great. Does anyone else want to add anything to that question? Any advice to those who might be scared?
I think that's great. Managing your news consumption is a huge thing. And so I agree entirely with Sadia on this point. There's a lot of people consuming more news than maybe is necessary. And so you want to regulate that in some way because it can really be a challenge.
Right, can be overwhelming. Absolutely. Let's see. Okay, oh, this is an interesting one. I'm gonna start with Sharon, and then I'm gonna get to you, Hildur. And obviously, I would really appreciate all of your opinions on this particular question, but I think this is very interesting. What has this pandemic shown you about how healthcare is working or not working? Our current healthcare system as it exists today.
Well, when people are dependent upon their health care, like jobs, and then their jobs are taken away, and so is their health care taken away. And now they don't have, which actually raises the same statement that, you know, Sadia was talking about, that raises fear. Because now, not only are you scared of getting an illness, now you're scared of what to do, because now you don't have health insurance either. And is it okay to go to a hospital? Is it okay to go to a doctor, the urgent care? Am I going to be covered? Is it going to cost me? You know, I need a test. What is that going to mean for me? So all of that's present right now. It just increases the fears. And sometimes what it also will do is it will keep people away that need to be tested, that need to come into this treatment, that need not to be out there in the public, that need to know that they need help. And I think when they're afraid of not having the health care that would cover that, you know, it's not only harming them, but it could harm those that they're in a relationship with.
Right. Does anyone else want to comment about how the healthcare system may or may not be working? And feel free to chime in, whether it's pre-COVID, during COVID, or, you know, opinions on how you think the healthcare system could potentially be improved post-COVID.
Well, I think one of the things that's exposed is that I think we already appreciated it before, but given that, the topic for this panel around healthcare and mental health care during a time like this makes plain how we don't really fund healthcare, mental health care adequately at all when it comes to insurance coverage. I mean, it's troubling enough that medical health care of a traditional sort is not adequately funded, and there are so many people uninsured. Even among people who are well insured, their mental health care suffers dramatically by comparison. And the insurance companies in some ways exploit that. Like New York State has a Mental Health Parity Act, and routinely, at least clients that come to my practice are unaware of the ways in which they are actually entitled to specialized care if they have some diagnoses that are covered under this Mental Health Parity Act. And if there were something comparable on a nationwide scale, it would force insurance companies to really recognize the need to cover mental illnesses in the same way that we recognize the treatment for other medical illnesses.
Thank you.
Amen.
For all of us, we've all suffered under this because as practitioners, we face this challenge routinely. It's a really difficult problem. And mental health care interferes with people being productive. It interferes with our lives in every sphere.
Absolutely. And do you still find in your respective practices that there's a stigma around mental health? When I was growing up, there was this stigma that if you needed help, you had to be tough, you didn't want to admit it. And I think that a lot of that has died down, but do you find that that's still very relevant in your practices today? You do?
Yes, highly relevant. Yes.
How about you, Sadia?
Very, very much so. I think there are a lot of people who still feel like seeking help is a sign of weakness. And it's often a big thing that we have to work through in the beginning of therapy. People will come in and they know that they need the help, but they're also shaming themselves for having to ask for help. So it's a big hurdle. And, certainly in a lot of immigrant communities, even more so, where there's a lot of, cultural stigma around mental health in particular. So it is something that we certainly see a lot of. It's decreased, and I think as more and more awareness is made around mental health needs, the stigma is coming down, but it is something that's there.
Okay. I'm going to ask a follow-up question. Given the stigmas, do you think that this pandemic has made it easier for folks to kind of step up and say, I need help, or do you think it makes it more challenging? And I ask because on the one hand, it's consuming a lot of the conversation, right? We're all in this sort of, there are communities of people feeling, maybe scared, have high anxiety or even depression. And so we're talking about it, much more, it's much more in the conscious collective. So that, sometimes it's if someone doing something, it might be easier to come forth. Or do you think it's harder because we're kind of self-isolating and sheltering in place?
I come from a different perspective because I work with trauma. Kind of, I think, a different perspective than the cognitive piece. So what I have found is that everyone has had trauma in their life at some point, childhood. It could be the smallest thing to the more extensive piece. And whatever coping mechanisms we used, they tend to get used now. Because people are feeling trauma in this moment. And so, people that need to withdraw, they're going to withdraw. People that need to, to keep themselves, not feeling, they're going to keep doing. And whatever it was that they needed to do. I've had clients who shut down. I have clients who, move forward, and just, I have to do more. I have to do more. I'm not doing enough, and then I have clients who are just, I'm not here. I can't be present, and so when I work with them, I'm looking at their coping mechanisms from their childhood. What was that? What was that they used that helped them survive back then? The tendency is to drop into it and then hopefully help them move past that so they can be in this situation a little differently.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else want to take a stab at that?
I find that my meditation groups are growing bigger. So many actually who haven't meditated before are showing up, and that I find very encouraging. 20 years ago, I remember when I started meditating, my mother was terrified that I had joined a cult. and I was not seen as sort of, but that's absolutely not, there's no stigma there anymore, I find. Meditation is becoming mainstream, like yoga. Yoga is good for the body. Meditation is good for the mind. And our issues are in our tissues, as we say in my profession. So you feel feelings in the body, and fear is one of these feelings we work with regularly in meditation. Fear is a very natural, it's a natural feeling in response to threat. And right now there's a collective threat. This is a collective trauma we're experiencing, a threat to our bodies. And it's appropriate to feel fear. It's neurologically wired, so to speak, from ancient times and even beyond, before the evolution of this human body. Threat is felt by other species, other animals. And as mammals get very complicated, you see dogs can have, trauma and anxiety as a result of that. And as humans, we really overthink the fear, flight, freeze response. We ruminate about that. And so right now we're working with, in our groups with meditation, with positive psychology, a supportive thought. Can I wake up in the morning and feel grateful that my lungs are working right now? Can I focus on that? Can I ruminate about positive things today? In that way, our mind is sort of tends to slip away and into the deep, dark fears that I have, especially when I feel that I'm threatened. It's a very natural reaction. But in meditation practice, we like to feel that loving awareness that's strong, that's soft and tender, and can hold fear. So I find that our groups are really more honest now too. Nobody's pretending that they've got this. People are really just all agreeing that this is really a scary time and coming together. So I like how I think it was the WHO who encouraged us to think of it as physically distancing, not socially. And I've been trying to reach out to friends, like Sharon mentioned, some people who have addictions or tend to self-isolate in everyday life, to reach out to those friends, to really make that phone call. If you know somebody has mental health issues, they need your call today. That's how I think instead of feeling self-pity, we turn to service and community and support.
Right. And I think, we talk so much nowadays about social distancing, but that doesn't mean social disconnecting, right? It just, and I think that's important. So I have a question. I'm going to ask, I think, Sadia, I'll address you, but then would be happy to have all of your perspectives. Have you seen this pandemic affecting younger people differently than older people? And how should both of these demographics handle the situation? So obviously there are different concerns with each group, but have you seen, why don't we start with the younger population first? And this can cover, let's do children up to 18 years old. As I said, I have young children and they seem pretty fine because they have each other. Not everyone is in that situation, but they at least have little playmates in the home. I know it can be tougher for middle school students and high school students. And are there particular signs that parents should be aware of? Like, are there any, red flags that, they should maybe seek help if, what's normal in times of a pandemic versus regular teenage life? It's hard to be a teenager on a good day. So I would love you to weigh in.
Yeah. It's hard to make a broad generalization, but I think one thing that I've noticed is that with children and adolescents, they are remarkably resilient, right? They are, if they have siblings, they're playing with their siblings. If, and it almost feels like an extended break at times. It I think it's important that they stay connected with their classmates and, with family. That's always very, very important. And in the midst of all this, there's still anxiety. And I think it's something that we need to be aware of, right? So again, if, the news is on and they're hearing something, or they hear their parents talking or their friends talking about things, on texts and whatnot, there is opportunity for worry. And I think it's important, one, to validate the emotion and let them know that it's okay to be scared, and that, these are unprecedented times. So whatever they're feeling is perfectly okay. It's important to have places for them to talk and open spaces for them to talk, both with family and, for older teens, to make sure that they're also talking to their friends and, doing that as well, and that they stay engaged, right? So not on the screen all the time, that they are getting some fresh air, that they are, going out into the backyard and playing if possible, things like that. It depends on, what's reasonable. But all those things, I think, are healthy coping strategies that we want to encourage. As a parent, I think the things I would encourage parents to look out for is if your child seems socially withdrawn, if they are not talking as much, if they are kind of isolating more so, right? So just not engaging in anything. If they're sleeping a lot during the day, things like that, you wanna check in and see what's going on there, and if needed, just going back to your last question about insurance and what this tells us about what is right and wrong with with the whole system. I think one thing that's come out is the fact that telehealth is now available. And that was something that really, before, a lot of insurance companies were not funding, and it just was not something that was considered normal, but now it is. So, if you need to utilize it, it's there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does anyone else want to weigh in on the younger population?
I mean, the thought I have with teens that's worth keeping in mind, parents feel very tempted to talk a lot, and teens are inclined to not like that. And so you have to kind of find what may be best termed a sweet spot if you have some concerns, and they may become more evident now because you're spending so much time together. And so the balance may be around what, as a parent, asking yourself, what is the main point I want to get across to my child now, and do it in a short kind of message. So, if there are kids in my practice who are being treated for anxiety disorders, I advise the parents usually to think of it as a hit and run. I want to say this one thing and I'm going to walk away. And it may need to marinate a little bit. You have to be potentially a little patient with it and not expect there to be an immediate reaction just because you've made some suggestion to, let's say, reconnect with friends if the child is feeling depressed, which many children may be. Seniors who would otherwise enjoy their last months of senior year of high school are probably deeply depressed about that collectively. And so that warrants some attention, but it also needs to be balanced against the inclination of many parents to talk more than is warranted. So it's a hard balance to strike, because we'll feel the pain of our kid, and the saying that you're only as happy as your least happy child is applicable here. But you have to be prepared to live with that a little bit, and you're going to be in the presence of it a little bit more intensely too.
That's a good point. Sharon, did you want to say something?
I was just thinking, I work with adults, so, I give you guys this working with the young ones, but I have a granddaughter who will be 17 next month. And so I think about her struggle. This is someone who, came Friday night, bye-bye and see you Sunday, and she was out all weekend, with friends and being 15, 17 years old, junior high school. And, in the beginning it was, I'm getting out there and not, my son is very clear about no one's leaving the house. You're not driving the car, you can't get in the car with a friend and just take a drive. And, and it took the beginning of her being somewhat rebellious And, we talked about it, to allow her to be rebellious and have the boundary. And, she's allowed to feel frustrated. She's allowed to, be where she is. It's hard. Allow that and still hold the space that you need to hold. And that seems, and she seems at this point just to know that this is what life is.
Right.
She's
Right.
she's not hating him at this moment for making this, taking all this away from her. And, but she had to work through that, and that has to happen.
Right. Right. We have some questions coming in on Facebook right now. One is, how can I avoid burnout as a college student who can't really pause on work, but also can't leave to take some space during this pandemic? And I think, maybe if you have any tips, I know some of you incorporate mindfulness and meditation. So maybe if there are some tips you can also add as you weigh in. Is there anyone who is just itching to answer that question? Or, I can pick on one of you. And Hilda, do you want to start?
I'd love to start.
I feel like that's right up your alley.
Anyone feeling zoomed out? It's a new term. There are so many wonderful offerings in this time, and for the students in particular, there is, there's so much pressure to have to study on your own and keep up with everything, and at the same time there are fun things happening. Sign up for this. This is very interesting, and I have people who feel just overwhelmed from positive offerings in this time online. So it's become a virtual reality that we're connecting to. And as someone who shelters in nature in the living world, and it is a terrific time of year to connect with spring energies. I'm not sure if the question is from someone in this area in particular, but outside always provides for us the breath we're breathing. So connecting in mindfulness to breath and noticing that you're not just the breather, you're receiving your breath. So when we're outside and we take that breath mindfully and notice that it's coming from the trees or from the living world that's breathing with us, and then exhale and connect to where you are right now. So with presence, even if we're feeling overwhelm or anxiety, whatever the emotion may be, when we take a moment and breathe and connect mindfully and we're present, you may even find a little bit of space to just be there. And in that, there is a sense of connection. And that connection is something we can then work with. From that place, when we stop non-essential thought, now that we have closed the non-essential businesses and we're staying in place, sheltering in place, I shelter my body. I like thinking of my home as my shelter. And my real shelter is the living world with which I breathe, my immediate environment. And but meditation, my awareness is the shelter for my mind. So when we are aware, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling anxious, naming that feeling. And in neuroscience, there's a saying, name it to tame it. So once we recognize that, okay, I take an exhale and then I breathe in a little bit more space. I can handle this. I'm okay. I can handle this too. And I'm just going to do the best I can. I don't have to be any better than that. And I think with meditation, we learn to be comfortable with who we are and how much we can do, and not try to be more than that.
Right.
For that. Yeah.
And I would like to just give a quick plug for it's only one day of the week right now, but we as a campaign have started installing Wellness Wednesdays. And as I mentioned earlier, if you were on, Hilda meditated with us, and we all did it sort of together in our own homes, but also somewhat connected. even taking a few minutes to meditate it really can help you get some clarity and clear away the clutter. And there are some free apps where you can meditate. I used to use them at times in my life when things were particularly overwhelming. As I said, I have 3 little kids, so sometimes I would really hide in the bathroom and I would do a 5-minute meditation. But it worked. We have to find our ways. So we'll post those in the comments. I think that can be helpful. And you're welcome to join us on Wednesdays. I think we're going to have to borrow Hilder a few more times to offer some meditations to our community. I have more questions. They're starting to really roll in now. So I don't know, Dean, if this might be up your alley, but many families now are struggling due to loss of unemployment. I think this week, they announced that 22 million people in this country have filed for unemployment. And really the number is much higher than that because so many haven't had the opportunity to file yet. People are, now starting to really worry about how are they going to pay their bills? How are they going to pay their rent, their mortgage? And are now met with this very high level of anxiety that can sometimes feel paralyzing. So what advice do you have, for folks who may be in that situation or even half in that situation, and when the world feels so out of control, how can we help them gain a little more grounding?
I mean, the challenge with this is there's a measure of uncertainty that we're facing in general, whether it's due to immediately being unemployed or the prospect of a reduction in income down the line. And so, many people are facing strain in a number of dimensions around what their prospects are. And the challenge with uncertainty is that, we like predictability. And in our day-to-day lives, we actually usually do live with a measure of uncertainty that is acceptable. We find some zone of acceptability. And now suddenly, the vast majority of the public has to live with some level of uncertainty. So the question that's worth asking yourself is, what are the steps that we could take concretely that will alleviate some of that uncertainty? What are the things available to us right now? And so oftentimes people have resources that maybe they lose sight of because anxiety on the one hand, as Hilda mentioned before, is indeed an old evolutionary response that's designed to protect us. But we do know that there comes a point where it overwhelms. And so we need to really dial it back. The anxiety that you're experiencing probably is there to serve a function. And so it's worth kind of remembering that and thinking about how it will serve to problem solve for us. If someone's worrying too is an adaptive response. Worrying normally happens in most people. And the utility of it is to generate problem solving. So if you find that you're paralyzed by your worry, take a moment and ask yourself, how can I utilize this to come up with a problem solution? Just one. And even if that problem solution is going to be for the remainder of the week or even the remainder of the day, that at least will set you off of that path of feeling that you can't do anything, which is terrible. And that's the kind of thing that fuels depression, the feeling of helplessness and hopelessness that sometimes people can derive. But if you take a moment and ask yourself how the worry can be utilized effectively to spur on problem solving, then you may be able to switch that over into something that'll be productive.
Mm-hmm.
Good advice. Anyone else want to add to that particular question? I'm definitely sensing a theme of like validating one's feelings here.
Sure.
And, recognizing the moment or naming what those feelings are. I think even something as simple as that, and Hilda has taught me that actually, that in moments of frustration or anger, take a second and breathe and name it. And then, recognize that you're okay. And sometimes that can be enough to, take the next step forward. Thank you. My next question, I'm going to ask Sharon, but then please, whoever would like to add to it, please do so. And just again, I'm going to remind our viewers, if you have any questions, please go ahead and write them in the comments and I'll be happy to answer them. So Sharon, to you, there are a lot of folks who experience or have experienced trauma in their past. And there are some folks who are living with others that that's the right way to I'm changing this question a little bit, but there are folks who are in living situations where the folks that they are around might incite their trauma or be causing their trauma. What advice do you have? So it's sort of a two-part question. One, to folks who maybe triggered by this experience, and you talked a little bit about this earlier, falling back into these coping mechanisms. What advice do you have to those folks? And then what advice would you have for someone who may not be in an ideal situation or potentially dangerous situation if they're in some type of domestic abuse type of relationship?
As far as people experiencing the trauma, this is traumatic. We are living, like everyone has said, it's unprecedented. It brings up hopelessness. It brings up powerlessness. People lack control. We have none. The unknown is one of the most frightening things for most people. And we are living in the biggest unknown. So, when we can pay attention to the trauma inside and become aware of how we are working with it, as I said, I'll check in with my clients and I will hear, what's really happening. All right, I'm in shutdown. All right, and we'll connect to that place of where they're reacting from. So I think trying to step back for a moment and just to feel, first of all, to recognize that trauma is existing and that you're reacting to, like we talked about naming, right? This is part of naming, to name that this is very real, and powerlessness is real, and hopelessness is real, and no control is real. And to allow yourself to recognize that first, and then to say, all right, how am I being with it? What's happening for me?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things. And then from there, to be able to say, what, I know Jane is saying that, what can I do with this? Where do I reach out? How do I, there's something, how do I not get stuck in it? When you can name it and recognize it, you can move through and not get stuck there. And people that are in, the world is scared at the moment about what is happening to loved ones or themselves. And of course, someone who's living with someone that is abusive lives with an additional fear that is extreme because they're stuck, and what I would say to them is, you talked about going to the bathroom to meditate. Get into the bathroom and make a phone call. Reach out, let someone know that you're in a dangerous situation and you're scared. There are the hotlines that are out there for people,
Right.
Find a safe moment because it may not be.
Mm-hmm.
So, do it. Like I said, your example of meditation in the bathroom is perfect. Find a way just to make that one phone call for a moment or two that you're not alone. And if it's really dangerous, find a way to reach out to someone. There is a hotline that's being advertised constantly. Reach out.
Mm-hmm.
Get help.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to add to that one? And that was a heavy question, and it's okay if not. We can move on. I have another question from Tony and Sadia. I'm going to direct it at you, so we'd like to hear a little more from you. And we touched upon this. I think Dean touched upon this a little bit, and Tony says that reading the news is immensely tough. I think we can all agree to that. So Tony would like to know, how can he avoid feeling disillusioned or nihilistic from it all?
It's
easy
tough.
one.
Yeah, no, it's tough. And I'm sure this is something that a lot of us are struggling with. I think being informed to a certain level is essential, right? So we do have to consume some of the news that's out there. And at the same time, we have to recognize what effect the news is having on us, right? So when we see in our body physically we're getting anxious, we're getting tense, that's the time to stop. And I think it's really important to balance that with time where you are spending thinking about what you have to be grateful for right now, right? And find the positives, find the silver linings. We're not cooped up at home, right? Like, find the blessings that are in being at home, and whatever positives you can find. If you're working all the time and you can't connect with people, this is a great time to now pick up the phone and call people, right? So there are ways to find balance, and I think that is really the way we stop from feeling disillusioned and just frankly petrified about what's happening.
And Hilda, I'd love for you to weigh in as well, because I think this is very much in your wheelhouse.
Yes, the first thing that came to my mind was exactly what Sadia mentioned: gratitude. It's almost all the wisdom traditions and religions will have some form of gratitude practice, and working with reassuring oneself, the self-talk, is something that helps. It's known to help. So positive psychology guides us that way. So you get out of bed in the morning. What's the first thing you do? I was working with someone whose first thing they did was check the tweets, the Twitter. I listen to birdsong, so that's my kind of Twitter. But, that's a choice. But if the first thing you do is check certain Twitters, especially the T Twitter, that can send you like really down that rabbit hole where you stay in the dark all day. Now it's very important to be aware. Awareness is part of my practice. So I'm very aware, and I pick the times to check in on the news. I don't have it running in the background all day. We can acknowledge pain, we can be aware. Ignorance in my tradition and on the Buddhist path that I follow philosophically and in my practice, we work with ignorance in terms of meeting ignorance with education.
That sounds just like the political sphere.
Yes, so I could spend all day being, just disillusioned and upset as an environmental activist and educator, or I could just get to work, the next right thing, apply myself in some way to be part of the solution, not the problem. Because if I'm in my house and I'm that was Dean's dog. I love it.
Oh, I thought it was your dog.
No,
No,
mine.
I went on mute.
I love it.
I think your puppy has something to add.
I think that the dog agrees that we must stay positive and we must let our voices be heard, and we must be part of the solution. We don't want to live in a world that's drowning in their own dissatisfaction and disillusion. So one of my favorite teachers, her name is Joanna Macy. She's really wonderful, and she brings a perspective to this that's love for the world. And her latest, there's a book, Wild Love for Life, or something like that is the title. But do you love your life? Like, how amazing to be alive. Do we even spend time appreciating that we are alive? We spend enough time worrying that we're gonna die. But how much time do we spend appreciating this moment? I'm alive right now. I feel, what am I doing to really connect to that vibrancy that is not to be taken for granted? And there's a mystical dimension to that. If you really feel alive and you want to connect to the sacred, you can actually engage in a sort of a ritual that's your personal ritual. You don't have to go to church to do that. It can be a very personal thing where you appreciate your life and you give yourself a couple of supportive thoughts. If being if being negative about the situation is your way to be, then I respect that. But if there is something within you that says, well, I think I deserve better, I want to enjoy my life, I can enjoy my life. That's a state of mind. That said, I would like to encourage everyone, if you have a friend who is dealing with serious mental health problems, depression or anxiety, that's not to just, as a mindfulness instructor, I'm very aware that I can't just say you have to change your mind. For some people, they're stuck and they need help. And this is the time not to just think of ourselves, but think of each other. So if you have a friend, make that phone call, call your friend who tends to, go into a dark place. And we could probably all think of one or two who could use our help right now. In that way, when we reach out, we remember we're not alone, and we were never alone. Now we're in this great unraveling that's going to lead to the great turning. And now it matters what we turn to, who we turn to, what type of person do we want to be in the world, what kind of do we want to be an agent of change. And when this changes, because everything is always changing, and we don't know that it will be over, but we know that it will change, are we going to return to business as usual?
Well, we hope not, right?
That's
we certainly hope not.
That's the deal. That's the Green New Deal.
That's right. And we're going to have a town hall on that too. So.
Yeah, so what's your deal? Like, do you want to be, nihilistic and negative and just, sit there and think it's all over? Then it's all over for you. But for me, I get up in the morning and I want to see a better world. Mm-hmm. And I want to be part of that, change making.
Right. One of the things I think that I keep hearing, and I think for those who partake in a daily meditation practice or a yoga practice, it becomes sort of really part of your routine or part of who you are. But the word in itself, practice, right? Mm-hmm. It's a practice for a reason. And that's because it takes practice. It's not always easy when you're experiencing some kind of mental health issues, or you're, mm-hmm. Something like a pandemic. It's not mm-hmm. easy. That gratitude. And where I live, we have this wonderful little bookshop in town, and they always have these neat little gifts. And one day I was in there and there was this little blue box and it said gratitude on it, and I just was drawn to it because I had really been trying to find things in my life that I was grateful for. See, I was watching too much news at the time. And I opened the box and it said inside in these little gold letters, write down one thing that you're grateful for. And there were these little pieces of paper and it came with a little marker. And I bought it right on the spot. And I try to do that. I'm not always perfect. I don't do it every day. But I try to when I can. I try to write down something. If I see the box, if it's in my room, I write something down. And I think that's a really neat little tip. It's kind of like a little trick that will help us practice gratitude. And I think it's nice if you live with others, they can do it as well. And like children can do it as well. And, it's a way to, I think, to your earlier point, when things are so out of control and we don't know, and it's scary, it's a way to kind of cement us in that moment, pulling in and taking ownership over, ourselves and our surroundings. So thank you for that.
Yes, and some of the great change makers, I can think of Mother Teresa. There are teachers out there that deal with very difficult situations, but you'll never see them not smiling. I think Desmond Tutu and Dalai Lama wrote the book on joy. I think it's your birthright to feel joyful, to be alive, to feel those positive emotions, and that's a choice that you turn to.
Yeah, and I like that perspective.
Yeah,
I think that practice that you just talked about, I know I wrote a whole Facebook post about gratitude. We're in the darkness, and the gratitude is light. It really allows the light to come in and shine through. So right. I think that,
and even when some people may be in a place that they're like, well, you're not in my house and there's nothing to be grateful for here. There are certain people who have a negative way to deal right now. And then in those cases, I like to take it down to a very basic emotion that is love. And love is something that there's something that you love. It may even be ice cream, but something, it may be a pet. It may be, there may be something that you love, something that brings out the best in you.
I so agree. And I also,
and that's the path, right?
Right. And if someone can actually say that to me, that there's nothing, they're able to say it to me, then that's something to be grateful for. They're not alone in that moment.
Yeah.
Someone else that's holding it with them. So
wonderful.
That in itself is gratitude.
I love that. I have another question that I think is a lot lighter and potentially a lot easier and maybe more opinion based, but right now, as we're, isolating at home, sheltering at home with only our immediate families, there's a lot of talk and attention being placed on shelters that are housing pets who need homes during this particular pandemic, these unprecedented times that we find ourselves in. Would you recommend fostering pets during this time as a way to kind of cope? I mean, it seems to me like if you're not allergic, it's a two birds, one stone kind of scenario, right? I have a dog and I'm so thankful for his love and his cuddles. And I find myself, now that I'm home more, he's always on my lap as I'm working. He joins a lot of our Zoom calls. But there's so many animals that need to be taken care of right now that, I mean, what's your opinion on that from like a mental health perspective? Is that something that really does work?
So I can say that I actually have a few clients who did happen to foster over the past few weeks, and they have said that it is the best thing that they have done. And it's just a wonderful, opportunity that they probably would not have had before. And I think it's connection, and it's something, who isn't happy around a pet, right? So why not? I think if you have the opportunity, do it.
Great. Dean, did you want to share?
No, I was going to add, obviously, you have to know that you really like pets. So this could be an unwanted stressor if you aren't careful. I would say, the other thing is be prepared to potentially keep that animal that you're fostering, because you may quickly become more attached to it. So just kind of think long term about it. It is a good idea, and animals are known to be stress relievers in a general way. So I encourage it with some caveats.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Yeah, I thought that's it's an interesting time right now. We're closing all these essential businesses, and there are many pets that need a home. So even on a temporary basis, it might help just in the short term to foster, which is great. I have a question, and I'm gonna just caveat this with, I don't know what this is. So maybe one of you do. And this is a question that comes from Frank. Do you use or believe in using solfeggio frequencies? I use them for healing and meditating. That Hilda might be our go-to for that. I'm not sure. Is it sound therapy maybe? Is that what that is?
Yeah, well, there are many different types of sound therapy, and I would answer this with whatever helps you. Connect to the part of you that wants what's best for you. So there is something within us that's nurturing. There's like a part of you that makes good decision, and if this works for you, yes, there are many different ways to meditate. And for some people, sitting meditation is not for them, then walking meditation will be what works, or going for a run or a jog, in some way taking good care of the body and being present while you're at it. And that's self-care basically. And so if sound therapy is your thing, yes, go ahead. And I don't think you can do too much of that. and I actually like listening to music of any kind. So that's a form of I think in this time, as we shelter in place, I at least personally am feeling tremendous gratitude for the arts and humanities and all the wonderful books that have been waiting for me to read them. So
I love that.
Yes.
I think, something you said earlier, Hilda, about, oh, look at this. We got a little friend. Say hello.
Oh, hi. Actually, one of this person brings out the kind in Annie. Like kindness
Yes.
is cute.
Yes. I'm very thankful. My 5-year-old she lives to make others happy. She will meet you. Some of you have met her, and she will say, she'll just think of something that she thinks will make you feel better. Frequently it's something like, you're beautiful, you're very handsome, you have a very kind heart. So I'm thankful, I'm grateful for her as well. But I think you know, a lot of what we're talking about, you know, throughout this conversation is about being able to name that feeling and then trying to, you know, find the gratitude, find the light, or find the opportunity, right? So, you know, someone had asked a question about, and it was actually directed to Dean, but I'd love for all of you to answer this because I think you each have such amazing perspective. And the question was, what will be the long-lasting effects of this pandemic? And so you know, I'm running for Congress, as you know. So for me, I've been focused for the last many, many months about creating a better world. And while the pandemic has thrown our campaign for a lot of loops, you know, I see the pain and the sorrow and the loss right now. But I try to sort of honor that, but then I try to move forward and see, well, how can we create a stronger healthcare system? How can we fix our environment? How do we fight for that in meaningful ways? And so I look at the long-lasting effects. I'm hopeful that will be presented with choice and opportunity, and I just hope people take it. You know, and that's my job to continue to push along in this campaign and try to help people recognize that. But I'd love for you to each just share a few thoughts about, you know, what you think the long-lasting effects will be. And they can be broader, they could be specific to a particular area. Why don't we start with Sharon, and then we'll kind of go down the line, if that's all right. So the long-lasting effects.
I think it is a wonderful opportunity for healing. Stopping our lives, stopping the quickness of it, separating while not separating, because I find more communication now from people than when they were busy and doing. So people are reaching out more. So I think that there's an opportunity for healing if we don't forget. The biggest thing is that we don't forget. How do we hold on to coming through this in a healthier, more healed way? Because we can. And I think from that place, life is not going to be the same. And we're all going to have a new normal. And I don't know what that will look like ultimately, you know, because I don't have that crystal ball. But I know that's going to change. And I do believe that the earth, as well as each of our individual beings, have an opportunity to heal and grow from this and come out of it stronger than we ever came in.
Wonderful. Dean, how about you? What do you think the long-lasting effects will be or could be?
Sure. So I'll start with what I think it won't be. So people have asked me, do you think a lot of people are going to develop severe OCD following this? Because we are doing things that are on the recommendation of the CDC that we never thought we would do before. I've spent a lot of my time in my career studying and working with people who have severe contamination fear. And a colleague of mine commented a few days ago that she found herself out on her porch cleaning her groceries with sanitary wipes. And she started to cry because this is the kind of thing that people who struggle with contamination fear do all year long. And she shocked herself. And I felt the same way. I've been doing some of the same things. And I think we have very good reasons to think that that will not last. I've talked about this elsewhere. And I think there are some very compelling reasons why that will not be a lasting problem. What we've learned from past pandemics that were never anywhere near as severe as this one is that we can expect that after this is over, there will be increases in depression. I want to highlight groups of people who work in essential industries, so healthcare workers in particular, but other workers like people who have been delivering our food for us, who've been doing our shopping for us, who have been delivering our mail, who have been performing a whole range of essential services. I can't even name them all. What we know from prior research is that those are individuals who are at a much greater risk for trauma-related problems. And so anybody watching this, if you work in an essential industry or know someone who does, please urge them to pay attention to their mental health, perhaps more so even than those of us that have the luxury of staying home, because that I think is a real, significant challenge that we could face when this ends. The other thing and I'll try to end on a more optimistic note. So the last several years, the American Psychological Association has done these pretty large scale surveys, and they've been finding that the stress on the part of the population at large has been going up overall, separate and apart from the pandemic. one of the things that other investigators have found is that a way to offset that a little bit is if you engage in something that you know contributes even in a small way to some of the change that might ultimately happen. And so engaging in activism is actually a benefit for your mental health. The rise that we've seen in people being really politically engaged, and I don't mean like slacktivism and spending a lot of time protesting on Facebook, because that actually is not necessarily very helpful, but really actually going and doing things like, helping Melanie with her campaign. Things like that are actually legitimately mental health benefits. And I'm actually not kidding. I'm not saying that just because I'm on a panel with you here, Melanie. I really do mean that. So I hope that people will do more of that kind of stuff and really notice that it will have some benefit, because at the end of it, you do feel better.
Great. Thank you so much, Dean.
Of course.
Sadia, I would love to get your opinion on the lasting effects of this.
So I'm going to answer with what I hope will happen, which is that I hope that, people take this time to really take stock with, in what they have, and also, what's really important in their lives. I hope it's a time where we're able to let go of grudges and mend relationships that can be mended. I hope that it's a time where we, start to realize on a larger perspective, what our country needs. And as Dean says, get involved in the ways that we can to both contribute, locally, and also on a larger level. I think, as we were saying before, there's so much that's wrong with our healthcare system. There's so much that we need to do for our environment. There's so much that we need to do for marginalized communities. And I think, frankly, this pandemic is highlighting all of that. And my hope is that this will get people to contribute and give back.
It's beautiful. Thank you. And then Hildur, if you would give us your opinion on if you think there will be lasting effects.
There will most certainly be lasting effects. I don't personally know what it will be, but every single one of the plague that we've had pandemics before in human history, and we can go through the records and see what happened as a result of that from the Egyptians and so on. What I do know is what I hope, like Sadia, I don't know what will happen. That's the uncertainty, the unknown. What I hope will happen, and I'd like to channel Joanna Macy, because she was an environmentalist before the term was even coined. But she calls for great turning in this great unraveling towards an awakening of sorts. To me, is awakening to the reality of the situation. Why are we having this coronavirus crisis? This is a call for an honest and fearless examination of the causes and the conditions that caused this. And it brings us back to illegal wildlife trade, disruption of habitats, the mishandling of animals in the wet markets. And I'd like to hope that an awakened society, humanity that's now bonded in this, responding to this shared threat, perhaps a more compassionate, a more kind humanity, would examine the causes and conditions and actually respond to this properly. Stopping the illegal wildlife trade, leaving habitats intact, and especially the life-giving ones, the life-sustaining ones. I work with Tree Sisters, women seeding change, and we're reforesting the tropics and not doing a good enough job because the deforestation is happening faster. And that's, in itself is a real problem for all of us who breathe oxygen for a living. And it boils down to very simple practices of awareness, awakening, and understanding what matters. And it all brings us back to you, Melanie, with the Green New Deal.
Yes. And as I said, we will be having a town hall on the Green New Deal as well.
Yeah.
I'm very excited. And you know, we can certainly talk about that public health and, you know, link to the black market trade and disrupting ecological systems. We can definitely talk about that at that point. But I do want to stay on task today with this panel. And I know we're really just a few minutes past time now. So I just want to thank you all so much for being here. You know that I respect you all tremendously. I think you're incredible people. And I thank you for really sharing your gifts. And Dean, for that amazing plug to come in and help our campaign to make us feel good. I know that a lot of our viewers are wanting those tips, right? So, you know, to reiterate just a few things that I heard from all of you, which was, of course, naming and recognizing the feeling, validating feelings, trying to find the gratitude in the moment, and then trying to gain some control that way. But are there any, you know, this will be the last question, just, you know, feel free to throw in anything you'd like to say. But if you do have some resources that folks would potentially benefit from, please feel free to mention them. I'd also ask you, once we stop this panel, if you could go in the comments and put any resources that you think would be relevant. But if there are any quick tips, like we heard, meditation is a good one. I know that exercise, you know, can help with depression. And, you know, if there's any tips or just anything you want to say, just sort of closing words before we kind of sign off here, I would love to give you that opportunity. And I guess we'll go down the line one more time. And then, of course, if you forget anything that you'd like to share, you can put it in the comments. So Sharon, do you want to go ahead? Any tips, resources?
Well, actually, I just want to acknowledge there is a mental health hotline that has been established. And I would hope that people would use it, you know, or, you know, there are therapists that are signing up. I know I have to do some pro bono sessions if people need that kind of, you know, connection. So, you know, don't hesitate to reach out. You know, really struggling. You're not alone. And that's the biggest thing. People are here to help. And I think that the biggest resource that one can have is to know that no one has to be alone.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And you just gave me an idea, you know, as all of you know, most of my networks are political people. So maybe I will continue to post that hotline. It is on our COVID-19 resource page on our website, dorigo2020.com. But Donald Trump has been known to infuriate, you know, a person or two several times a day. So it may not be a bad idea to continue to just share that resource. So I've just made a note to myself. We will do that to remind folks that it does exist. So thank you for that. So I'll ask Dean now, any parting words and tips for our viewers tonight?
Sure. I think the most important thing is, while on the one hand, we're physically distancing and sheltering in place, to the degree that it's possible to stay active and not spend too much time inside your head. It's very tempting to do that. I will mention a couple of resources. So the Anxiety and Depression Association of America, their website, adaa.org, is just filled with a number of resources that are useful this time of year during the pandemic, as well as other times. The Association for Behavioral and Cognitive Therapies, abct.org, also has innumerable resources. The International Society for Traumatic Stress Studies, istss.org, likewise has numerous resources for people to rely on. So I urge people to visit any one of those for some options and additional pointers.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Dean. I've written them down. I can put them in the comments. If you could just take a look, make sure.
Sure.
Maybe
I'll be happy to post them. I'll go in and post them. Yeah.
Okay, that would be wonderful. I would appreciate that. Okay.
Yeah, of course.
Sadia, would you like to share your thoughts?
Sure. I think I echo everything Sharon and Dean said. All those resources are really, really important. With that, I would say, you know, the importance of social connection is really, really necessary. And, you know, as much as you can, to find that balance and stay connected with people. and try to be active and do something for yourself, right? I know a lot of us are juggling many hats, working, remote learning and doing this and that. And to say, to carve that time out is really essential. And, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes that is just for you, make that a part of your day. I think that is really, really important.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Hilda, any tips or resources or parting thoughts?
Yes. Okay, number one, be kind. Just be kind to yourself and to everyone else. And especially those who are not acting kind right now, they need your kindness. Just working on being kind and getting out there in the back or front living spaces. I don't know, not everybody is blessed with a back and front yard, but there are some parks open or just simple living, breathing spaces where we can connect. So I really recommend that. With Rewild Long Island is an organization where I volunteer. We are planting natives right now with Earth Day coming up. I think it's appropriate to, you can get out of your head and into the world, the living world, and do something good with your time. As we shelter in place, you can start composting or doing something that's beneficial for, it's really actually, I think there is a study that says gardening is good for your mental health. And psychological well-being. It can even extend the lifespan for people who are living in. I've heard of studies like that. I don't have it scientifically proven, but I know it personally from experience that touching earth can help, and planting a flower or two, or just feeling like a caring steward of this blessed earth that we're on. May as well, turn to that.
Right. Well, thank you so much. So we have so many wonderful options. We will post these in the comments. I'm going to start by saying I'm so grateful for all of you. I'm grateful for this panel, and I'm grateful that you were able to share all this amazing knowledge with our viewers and our broader community. So thank you so much for being here, everyone. Stay safe. And please reach out to us if there's anything we can do to assist you all. Most of you know this. We try to do events with all of our volunteers and our broader supporters. We've started movie nights. We have our Wellness Wednesdays to try to pull that social connection together. But thank you so much for being here. This was actually quite fun for me. I felt like very engaged in everything you were all saying. You know what they say, get a bunch of scientists together, best time ever, right? I mean, all of us, I have a master's in science too. I was kind of kidding, but I think that's true. I love being around scientists. So I appreciate the facts. Facts are important these days. We don't always get them. So to have reliable sources from such respected individuals like yourselves is just, I think, really important to our broader community. So thank you so much. And I guess we will sign off, and I hope to see you in real life very soon.
Same here.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thanks for having us.
It was a pleasure. It was nice seeing all of you.
Good to meet
Yes,
you.
absolutely. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Are we off?
Not yet. We're signing off now.
Okay.